My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So, I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired.
See! I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everybody. This is Mike Gibbs, and I'm back and so happy to be here today to answer any questions you have about building your technology career. Maybe you want to become a cloud architect or a solutions architect or an enterprise architect or a security architect or an AI architect. Well, I want to do anything I can to help you. Bring us your questions so we can guide you in the direction that you would like to know. A little bit about me before we begin. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers. I've been an architect now for a little bit over 25 years. I hate to say it, but it's over 25 years. Now I basically was the chief architect for the healthcare vertical at Cisco. I was a principal architect at Riverstone Networks. I was a principal architect at Comcast. And I've spent decades as an architect, and I've trained people all over the world that are working at every tech company you can think of. So I come here once a week to answer your questions. Before we begin, I want to tell you about a couple of things that we have going on. Most of them are free, and I want to invite you to them. I'd like to tell you that we're going to have a completely free Google Professional Cloud Architect Certification Bootcamp. My team is going to drop a link to register for that in the chat box. It's going to be completely free. It's going to be about 2 weeks of fun. We'll get geeky a little bit. Really looking forward to this. My team has made a fairly extensive set of labs in addition to me going into the architectural concepts and how the technology works and where you use it, which is what we do differently. So we're all excited about it. It should be fun. So register for that. It is free. Chris from my team will drop it in the chat box so you can find it, as well as in the description of this video. I also wanted to tell everybody that tomorrow we have our weekly How to Become an Architect webinar. I'm basing it on the cloud architect, but we will cover any other architect careers you like a security architect, enterprise architect, AI architect, network architect, or any other of the careers. We'll talk about what we do in these roles. We'll talk about the skills that you need for any of these roles that you absolutely desire. And we'll talk about how do you get hired when you lack experience. What do you need to do? So we'll talk about that as well, and it's all free. And the last thing I should tell you as well, that because it's Memorial Day, we are giving 50% off of every product and service we have for any of the things on our website. So bring us your tech questions, because I want to be able to help you, and I don't know how to help you if you don't ask me the questions. And my team's just a little behind the scenes, putting a couple things together. They'll be putting some chat boxes and things in a minute. Bear with me. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to Flying Kite's question. And she said, what's the most important soft skill for your success? That's a really great question. And it's a really great place to actually start for it. And she says, how can you practice these soft skills? So I kind of feel I was lucky in my tech career in that I didn't actually start in tech. I actually learned internal medicine as my first career. I was a nurse practitioner. And what I learned in internal medicine was very special. In internal medicine, I learned how to get a lot of information from all the information I needed, basically how to ask a patient questions and interrogate them to get what I needed. I also had to be taught what they called therapeutic communication at the time, which was emotional intelligence. Now, at the same time, I was taught how to diffuse situations and take the tension out of a situation. And I was taught how to really clearly communicate. Now, I didn't really understand the impact of those skills when I was younger. And I'll tell you, it was those skills that enabled me to win my first interview. It was those skills that enabled me to be an architect. And I'll explain to you why it helped me so much. And then I'll talk about the real soft skills that you need to be an architect. So in my internal medicine days, here's realistically what I actually did. A patient would come in and they would have a problem. It's called the chief complaint. Mike, my throat hurts. So I'd ask, what brings you in today? And they'd say, Mike, my throat hurts. And I'd say, can I ask you any questions? What makes it better? What makes it worse? And they'd tell me some information. And then I'd examine them, look in their ears, eyes, nose, throat. And then I'd make a diagnosis and I'd build a plan. But the process was really somebody came to me with a problem. I asked a lot of questions. I got some facts and figures, statistics, what have you. That's the objective things I found in my diagnosis, my assessment. I made a diagnosis and a plan. And then about 2 years later, and this is why I was instantly a principal solutions architect, 2 years later, I'm now in a role where a client's coming to me and they're saying, we'd like to expand our internet service provider in these additional 10 countries. How can we do it? So that's the same problem as the patient that came in complaining of a sore throat. Here I've got someone that says, I want to do this. Or I want to increase the revenue that we're getting off of our website. How could we do this? So I said, okay, somebody comes in with a problem. Now from healthcare, I learned how to ask the right questions and how to not offend people. And then what I learned from healthcare was you have to have a lot of information, theoretical stuff of how it works to make a decision. It's the exact opposite of the hands-on stuff. And what I mean by theoretical stuff is if I choose this option, it's going to make this better, but these two things work. If I choose this architectural option, it'll make this better, but these things will get worse. Now, if I choose this architectural option, it'll make this so good, but it's going to cost us here. So that's architecture, and that's the same as medicine. And then all of a sudden, building a plan is exactly what we do as an architect, is what I did in medicine. You know, you basically came and you built a plan for someone. Physical therapy, these medications, what have you. And by comparison, in architecture, what do we build? We build a plan. We build an architecture document. We build a statement of work. We build an RFP response. We're building plans. And the only thing we're not doing is touching the technology. So what I'll tell you is the ability to ask questions, the ability to be emotionally intelligent, the ability to authentically and empathetically communicate with the client, to be able to see things from the client's perspective, is going to be 100% absolutely critical. Now, the next thing that I'm going to tell you, flying kites, is you have to know how to sell. And to me, sales, when I was younger, I thought it was a dirty word. And the reason I thought it was a dirty word is I went with my father to buy a car. And the people that tried to sell my father a car, they were scary. They weren't believable. They weren't trustworthy. But then I learned that early in medicine, honestly, I needed to sell someone into take their medication and sell somebody else to stop smoking and sell someone else into losing weight. You can't do anything without sales. And when you're an architect, you have to be able to get the information from the client, evaluate all the available trade-offs, create an architecture team, lead that architecture team, and then present that back to the stakeholders and try to sell it to them, get their feedback and tune it and sell it back. Because if you don't sell it to them, there's no architecture. So I'd say communication skills, sales skills, empathy, those types of things, the most critical soft skills for a cloud architect. Great question, Flying Kites. And I'm so happy to see you here today. I know I've seen you many times. I guess we can go to the next question. And how do you practice them? That's the last part of the question. Well, you kind of have to be coached. And I can tell you in healthcare, I had years of coaching in these soft skills. I'll tell you I've had an executive coach, and I'll tell you I've read hundreds of books on it. So the key is most of us don't know when we're doing something that offends someone, makes somebody's happy, most doesn't know, unless they're expert body language readers. Sometimes people just don't know. The best example of this is this TV show I've been watching. It's called Young Sheldon. And Young Sheldon has an interaction with someone, and the person just wants to run away. And he says that went well because he just can't read the situation. So, you know, when we're talking about being able to get information, we're talking about reading people. And if we understand how people are thinking and how we can communicate to them, they're there. But a lot of times people need to be taught. And that's where I was going by that. So the best way is to get a coach. And that's why we have coaching and all the training programs that we do is to get a coach, because you have to learn how to see things from another person's perspective. And that may not be natural to someone. You may have to learn how to control your emotions during a challenging situation. And that may not be natural to someone. It may be natural to someone, but it may also not be. But we can learn any of these things. I always said humans are born with no interaction. We would never survive on our own. Now, a kitten would, but a human would. We couldn't even find food. My cat could, but we couldn't. So we had to learn to walk. We had to learn to talk. We had to learn to everything. So great news, we can learn it. So don't worry about it. Just get some coaching. That's what I did. Becoming an executive in top companies required having degrees, MBA and masters and PhD sometimes. How does Go Cloud Enterprise Architect grant me that if you do not have a degree or any traditional education? So let's be fair. There are plenty of dropouts like Michael Dell or Steve Jobs that are CEO of plenty of companies. And I also know a lot of CEOs that have never gone past a bachelor's degree. Now, I'll tell you, in most cases, if somebody has a PhD, they're going to teach in a university and not be working as a CEO of a company. MBA, definitely. And I do hold an MBA. And I do recommend MBAs. And I think it's a great thing. But here's the thing. When I went to my MBA program, I can tell you it was a great experience. I can also tell you what I did to make effectiveness. One is, by the time I did my MBA the second time, I did 2 MBAs, but let's just talk about one of them. When I went and did the MBA the second time, I had already been working for a while in business. I already had an executive salary. I was selling things, negotiating things, but I didn't understand business the way I really needed to. I mean, I understood the bits and pieces, but there was nothing that connected it together where it was that aha moment of this compound annual growth rate is going to require this. And if they have this and their margins are this is the amount of money they're going to need in the future. And are they going to run out of cash, be able to finance this? And I could see the big picture. And it did get me that in the MBA after having the business acumen. So when we teach people, you have to understand that in an MBA program, I will tell you that out of the 2 years that you go to school, they could probably shrink it down to about 6 months of things that you actually need. And I can also tell you, Hamed, that these things that are not in the MBA program are equally important. So after I did my MBA, I probably have about $100,000 of leadership skills trainings that Cisco and other companies sent me to because it wasn't enough. So what we teach you is the things that you need to know. So the knowledge on how to respond to an RFP, for example, the knowledge on how to build a business case, the knowledge on how to build an ROI model, the ability to look at net present value, future value, the ability to calculate a payment plan, the ability to determine whether it's more financially makes sense to host something, say, in the cloud versus the data center, the ability to determine which kind of opportunity cost, option A, option B. Of course, we're teaching business process engineering. We're teaching the way the business could be structured. Like, for example, a McDonald's might need a lot of structure in the way they're designed and a lot of structure in their systems because they have to do a repeatable process. Likewise, we may change the Ritz-Carlton, and that's a hotel that might need a little bit more flexibility. The staff might need to be doing more things. So in enterprise architecture, we do that. So, of course, we do a lot of MBA case studies, those types of things in our enterprise architecture class. Of course, we ask our clients to design it, present it to a series of executives, and get feedback on it from executives throughout the entire process. Now, this is an extensive program. We had some business school professors with PhDs put some of the business school components together. The 3 of us on our team that added to it all hold MBAs as well as 10 or plus years executive experience or more. So what's put in our business program is the kind of business skills, and there were some other executives from other companies that helped contribute to it. So what we have is everything that you need and nothing that you don't. And that's why people that lack degrees are getting hired, or people with bachelor's degrees or that weren't in tech. And I can give you an example of Emmanuel in the UK did not have a degree, and he was recently hired. I believe Nafuli, who just got his job in Manchester, England, his first job was a CTO after we trained him. I think he had a degree, but I'm not sure. But likewise, Delray Back got hired without a degree at CDW. Likewise, you can see a video of him on our channel. Likewise, Daniel Bose, who was 20 years old, hired by JP Morgan Chase, and he didn't even graduate high school or have a GED or a high school equivalent, but he's smart and a rock star. I can give you example after example after people that don't get hired with a degree. But I think the other side of it is degrees sadly took a lower place in American society and corporate value. And you can see, for example, it was Microsoft that got rid of degrees, and IBM got rid of degrees, and Google got rid of degrees, and Amazon got rid of degrees for most positions. And here's the reason why. What was being taught in school wasn't necessarily a relevant skill in the job. And if you learn to fly an airplane, but you have to do surgery, flying the plane is no good. And what's being taught in schools necessarily isn't what the companies were needing. They're being taught things. And I can say that for my education too. Did I really need to read about the humanities and intellectual heritage? Did I really need to learn Shakespeare? I mean, did that make me practice internal medicine better, which is what I went to school for initially? No, I can guarantee it didn't. No, more time in science, more time in anatomy, more time in anything else? Yeah, it would. But a lot of degrees are really unfocused. You might get this much of what you need. And you might need this much, and that's why degrees are good. But, you know, you get all this, but you really only needed this. And then we add the things you don't. So that's how we do it. And I'd love to see you on a webinar. We can talk, and I can make it clear. We can have a full conversation if you'd like. We have one tomorrow, but ask more questions. I would love to help. Chris, you can bring in the next one. Is it possible to become a cloud architect from being a cybersecurity information analyst? Of course it is. So Wallace was a sales rep hired by JP Morgan Chase as an enterprise architect. Jermaine was selling landscaping gear hired by SMHU, was it, after our training program, as an enterprise architect. Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom before she was hired as a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft. I just mentioned Emmanuel because he just got a cloud security architect job in England, and he never had a tech job in his past. I mentioned Afuli, whose first tech job was an enterprise architect. Al was a sales rep, really great guy, hired by Deloitte as a senior solutions architect at his first possible job outside after our training program. Pierre was a sailboat operator over in Canada, is now working as a solutions architect at LeaseWeb in Canada, for example. So of course it is. So it has nothing to do with what you've done in the past. It has everything to do with the skills that you have today. If what you know is cyber information analyst, you can't get hired in another job unless you learn the skills for those other jobs. But the reality is you can't hire anyone for these jobs. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but it is near impossible to hire an architect. And the reason it's near impossible to hire an architect is no one really knows what an architect is. They confuse it with an engineer. They learn all these engineering things, and then they go on an architect interview, and someone says, here's your weighted average cost of capital. Could you tell me how you would leverage that to determine whether you should build a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, or put everything in a public cloud? And the person doesn't know where to begin. Or they say, how would you architect your demilitarized zone for this type of let's say for a bank that has 10 million people's records and $2 trillion under management that needs access to the web servers? What would you do? What would that demilitarized zone look like? Or if you ask someone, how would you compare and contrast block storage, objects, file storage, the strengths and weaknesses of each types of storage, the architectural trade-offs, and when you use each where, you get nothing, because that's architecture, which is completely different than engineering. So the point is, as long as you get the training, Denzel, of course you can be an architect. It could be your next role. Could be a cloud architect, could be a security architect, could be an enterprise architect, or whatever you set your mind to, because at the end of the day, it's all about your skills. I can tell you I did it myself. I went from seeing patients in the office one day to senior network engineer, and within 3 months, lead architect, and within 2 years, principal architect. And you can too. It's all about just going after the skills, having the passion for it, getting the right training for it, learning from the right people that actually know, the people that know how to tell you what to do, how to groom you for the role. Get strong, better than the others. No one cares about your last job. All they care is about you. Because at the end of the day, when we hire people, we're really thinking, what can they do? Now, the answer to that is anything they really want, but is the person willing to do what it takes? So if you've got the skills and you can prove that you can do it on the interview, we ask you a question and you can show an answer and show that you know, you have no problem getting hired. And that's realistically the thing I want you to think about. So please feel free to ask more, Denzel. Love to address more, add more, do anything I can to assist. So, and if you've got another question, please ask. And if anybody has any questions, please ask them. I want to do anything I can to help you. Are the free boot camps for professionals, or can they be non-tech people gain for them? So any of the free boot camps we do on YouTube, they're all really intro level. So, and when we teach our paid programs, they're at the level that you need to be to actually do the job. And let's talk about the difference between an AWS solutions architect professional and what it takes to become a cloud architect. And you may have to watch these a couple of times, especially if it's new to you, because the content on these boot camps is deep. So even if it's basic fundamentals, it's still fairly complicated. And why do I say fundamentals? Fundamentals have all levels. And there's the fundamentals to be hired versus the fundamentals to truly start to understand things. And they're different level. So if I run a Google Professional Cloud Architect Bootcamp, I can do that in 30 hours, maybe 40 hours to put it together something good, 20 to 40 hours. And you can pass that exam easily. And that means you will know the names of the Google services, what those services do, and even how to set them up. But that's what it takes to pass the boot camp. And all of that is really intro level. Now, the jobs that are out there, they're not about, do I know the name of a Google service versus an Azure service? They want you to know, well, I've got these 4 compute options for this system. You know, what are the strengths and weaknesses of using a virtual machine here? And if so, what kind of performance do I need? What kind of CPU? What kind of DRAM? What kind of disk I/O? What kind of network performance is that application going to need? How many servers are they going to need? What operating system are they run? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each operating system? How are we going to harden it? How are we going to lock it down? What's the endpoint professional? So the architect's going to be trying to think about that just for a server. Now they'll be doing the same thing for the routers, the switches, the firewalls, the applications. It's all about, well, I've got this option and this option. This option's good at this and this and this, but this option's better at this, but it's really bad at this. And then which is best for the business? So that's architecture. And that takes a lot of judgment, like learning to practice medicine or learning surgery. And that judgment all comes down to theory. It's exactly the opposite of the engineering, which all comes down to how much you've done. So yes, these free boot camps are for non-tech people. You can do them, and they will be a very, very good start. But to go from the certified to hired, that is a different set of skills. And if you ask me what those skills are, I'll tell you for each one of the jobs, they're different. Our architect programs cover all of them. If you're not interested in an architecture career, I can still tell you what you would need for a cloud engineer or for something else. And that's the key. It's certifications plus skills. So the way I like to use certifications is get all the skills first. Get all the skills and then get certified. And why do I say this? Because if you understand all of the data center, then these certifications are really easy for you. But if you don't understand the data center, they're going to be hard. But if they're easy for you, they're nothing. Now, if you truly understand the data center and the network and the cloud, and what are the strengths and weaknesses of everything, how it fits together, how each individual technology works, you know how to tune it, and then you know how to design it, and then you're in really good shape. But if you just know the certification is just the Google stuff. What about all the other 150 things that are not the Google stuff? How do they fit in? Where does it work? That's the difference between certified versus hireable. Hireable is knowing it all. And that's why we spend about 1,000 hours when we train people. But the point is tech people, non-tech people, anybody can go and benefit greatly from these free training programs. Anyone. Hope that helps, TAW 3000. Green Fingers, you just completed a postgraduate cloud computing course. The projects were simple, follow-along worksheets. We briefly touched AWS, Azure, and self-paced. Need a good place to start. Should you do projects? If so, where? The end goal is to get employment. Currently have a sales and executive finance background. Okay, Green Fingers, what kind of employment would you like? Now that's the key. I've taken a lot of the people that have had master's degrees in cloud computing for that program, and I've retrained them and made them architects. But we really need to know which job you actually want, because the skills of an engineer And the skills of an architect and the skills of an airplane pilot and surgeon are so different. And if you do engineering projects, you'll show people not to hire you as an architect. And the same thing would happen if you start doing too many architecture projects. They won't take you seriously as an engineer if you wanted to be an engineer. So what exactly are you looking to do? If you don't know, I will give you the option I will talk about the cloud architect and the cloud engineer. So I'm going to tell you right now, I no longer recommend engineering positions for most people. We had a cloud engineering program. I made a conscious decision to stop selling that program about 2 years ago. I've spoken to him and published in many magazines. I think Forbes quoted me on this and another one's about why I stopped training engineers and why I no longer recommend engineering jobs. Engineering jobs, not architect jobs, engineering jobs, things that a cloud engineer would need to know how to do would be to write a Terraform script, write a Python script, write a Bash shell script, write a YAML template. That's half of the way something would be configured in things in the cloud. And of course, they might do some things. They'll do some cloud networking, some cloud Linux stuff, some application installation. Most of that stuff the cloud engineer does can be automated and be done by AI. So I don't recommend that as a place to go right now. But if I wanted to be a cloud engineer, what I would do is the first thing I would do is understand you're going to need really good Linux, You're going to need really good infrastructure as code knowledge. You're going to need some fairly solid scripting knowledge in Python and Bash, for example. So I don't like to use certifications as baseline knowledge, but I will say there is a Red Hat certified engineer. That would be the bare minimum Linux knowledge that I would ever want in a cloud engineer that I would hire. So it's nothing like the RHACA. That's the too basic for what's willing to be hired. I'm saying an RHCE level of skills, Red Hat certified engineer, minimum. In that cloud engineer, I also want someone that's got a little knowledge of the cloud provider. So like the AWS Solutions Architect Professional is fairly intro level, but I would still want that. It's a hard test because they made it hard, but what they're asking is relatively intro level knowledge. And that's even though it's a challenging exam. And that person, I would then want them to have good Terraform, good scripting skills, and typically speaking, some operating system knowledge. And they're going to be okay for that cloud engineering job. But what I talked to you just right then and there is a good year and a half worth of things that you'll have to learn after you've gotten out of that program. Now, by comparison, the roles that are not susceptible to being laid off by AI in tech are account executives. And that's a very high-paying job in tech sales. Solutions architects, sales engineers, cloud architects, enterprise architects, AI architects, and program managers. And here's the reason architects can never be replaced. Because as the architect, we've got to communicate with the executive suite. Same thing for a sales rep, same thing for a project manager, etc. So we have to meet with people. We have to learn about their needs. We have to learn about their goals. We have to communicate with a large number of stakeholders where we have to create teams. We have to lead these teams, for example. Then we've got to create governance structures in our clients. There's a lot of work that we do. So to be an architect, you basically you have to learn a new set of things. You have to learn the network and the data center. So I know where you came from. You got a lot of certifications. Now we need to get rid of all that certification stuff and replace it with the real stuff. And here's what I mean. I mean, if you're a solutions architect or a cloud architect and you walk into the client site and you start talking about AWS EC2 instances, they're not going to listen to you. They'll basically push the button. You'll be removed from the facility. But if you spoke to that chief information officer about migrating their 5,000 virtual machines and their 2 petabytes of data, now you're having a conversation. If you start just talking to them about how you're architecting their demilitarized zone and where you're using your next generation firewalls and where you're using your web application firewalls and what you're doing to harden and what kind of a content delivery network you're using and why, and what kind of a DDoS thing that you're why, again, you're going to have that real conversation. But they don't want to hear I'm using AWS CloudFront because it's cool because it's on my AWS certification. So here's the projects that actually work for an architect. Creating an architecture. So interviewing a client, finding out their business problems, figuring out the way the business architecture is and figuring out the processes they have, figuring out where the inefficiencies are in those systems, then evaluating what they have and creating a new technology blueprint for them. That's an architecture, documenting it up. And that's what I have my students do, green fingers, and I have them do it again and again. They're starting a new architecture project next week, for example. But that is something you could do. Now, another thing we do as architects is we respond to RFPs. So you could create sample RFP responses and show that you might know how to do that. Another thing we do as architects is we create thought leadership documents. So, for example, if you Google Michael Gibbs medical grade network, and you'll see that for Cisco, I wrote the reference architecture for how you would design systems for hospitals, doctor's office, tertiary care facilities, healthcare delivery systems, and such. And that's something you'll see everywhere. So that's the kind of thing you'll do. Another thing you do a lot of work with is you do a lot of leading and a lot of facilitating meetings. You're going to give a lot of presentations. So if you go out there and present at a conference, good. You're going to let them write a lot of articles. So, if you go out there and you write an article, for example, I periodically co-author certain books with things with my clients periodically, or do a special article or do something, because you're going to go out there and you're going to show people that, again, that's architecture projects. And architecture projects would be creating a CIO review board and getting their insight. And based upon their insight, here's the kinds of architectures you could design to solve those problems. And that's the problem, that when you went there, you learned how to write a script and how to click some boxes. And I know this because I've retrained a lot of the people that went there. The good news is you have a postgraduate degree and looks so good on your resume, and you didn't spend a lot of money for it if that's where you went. But now you're going to need to learn the skills for the job. That's the next phase. So I hope this made sense. If you join us on the architecture webinar tomorrow, we'll go over all the skills. But I'll give you a little hint. If you look at all of cloud computing, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with the data center. And all cloud computing is renting space in somebody else's facility instead of having your own facility. And that way, when you understand that, if you realize that a virtual machine in the data center from VMware in 1999 that they still have in most data centers, or an Azure virtual machine, or an Oracle virtual machine, or a Google Compute Engine instance, or an AWS EC2 instance, it's all the same thing. And then if you know that, you know when to use it. Now, if you know when to use a container and where to use a container, it's going to be the same container that you use in your data center that you use AWS, Azure, and Google. Doesn't matter. There's no change. If you understand the function as a service concept, and you understand how functions are scheduled in the cloud provider's equipment, then whether it's a Lambda function or a Azure function or a Google, I think they call it cloud function, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. And you can do that also in your data center too. So that's really going to be the thing. We need to get rid of that certification name stuff, replace it with the underlying knowledge of the technology, what it is, how the tech works, and how it fits together. And then you'll have a great job that you will absolutely love. Join us on the webinar tomorrow. And also I compiled a full list of every skill that you'll need, and it'll include the executive skills. It'll also include the technology skills that you would need. And I'll have Chris from my team drop that link here as well, and you can pick that up. And I really hope that makes sense. It helps. But that's why we need to know the job first. Chris, we can go to the next one. Oh, Chris, if you can just drop the link to the how to become an architect ebook that we wrote from the description. And that way, it'll list all the things like BGP, wide area networks, IPsec, and everything that Green Fingers needs, because I want them to have a great opportunity. Of course, I'll cover the full list tomorrow on Zoom, and we can talk there free. Porva, hi Mike, loved your videos. A brief about me. Thank you so much. You have 3.5 years total work experience as a cloud engineer. You've made Azure native apps and done a lot of CI/CD work integrating GitHub and Azure. What career paths are most promising to me? Promising in the sense that we'll have good job prospects in the West. So, Porva, I think you're looking at it slightly off. And let me try to figure out a way to get into this, because I really want to help you. So you've told me what you've done in the past. I want to wipe that off. And I want to ask you, What do you really want to do? And the reason I say this is, Ivan was a waiter, but he was hired by AWS as a solution architect, and they liked him so much he's already been promoted. Same for Jordan, who's been hired by AWS as a solutions architect, and he's also been promoted. And it wasn't a junior architect like an associate architect, which is a trainee. It's a real architect. At the same time, Jennifer got hired by JP Morgan Chase, and her last job was a mental health tech. So yes, you've done some work in engineering. Now, what would you like to do in the future? So what I would say is I would get out of engineering unless you are in love with it. Now, and here's the reason why I think you're going to see a lot more of it. You may notice, Apoorva, that a company does a layoff and then the next day hires sales engineers and sales reps and solutions architects. And then the next big company does a layoff and they cite AI. And 2 days later, they're spending money on AI and salespeople and solutions architects. What's going on is companies hire revenue or increasing revenue hiring people and automating that back end work as much as they can. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon which side of the equation you're on, the AI is getting really good. And because that AI is getting really good, it can code better than the bottom 30 to 50% of programmers at most companies. And that's why you're seeing that field being affected pretty terribly. And I think you'll see a lot more of it in the software development world. Now, the best of the best, people with good, strong judgment, the people that are working across groups and leading teams and have strong knowledge, they're always going to be needed because they're the best of the best. But the average person, that's where the concern should be. Just think about that. Now, if you move to roles that can't be automated, by the way, they also pay the most, especially in the West, like the sales engineer, the solutions architect, the account executive. Now you're talking about jobs that typically pay $100,000 or $200,000 more than their engineering counterpart per year and aren't typically subject to getting laid off because of AI. So, and that's typically a good thing. Plus, the other thing with engineering, and I worked in outsourcing earlier in my career, is it doesn't matter where the engineering is done. So I can hire an engineer in San Jose, California, or San Francisco, where to buy a house that costs $1.5 million, and that person's poor without a $300,000 salary. Likewise, I could hire another engineer in Mississippi who's just as good that will be thrilled for $150,000, and I'm going to get the best of the best. And then I might be able to go to India and for $40,000 a year, which is the equivalent of about $200,000, get an IIT graduate that's a rock star. So companies can easily outsource their engineering and their software development, and they do all the time, but jobs where you have to be in front of the customer, like as a solutions architect, where you're back and forth with the customer, you're leading teams, you're facilitating teams, you're selling, you're taking your client to dinner. Those kind of jobs can't be outsourced. Same thing for the sales engineer. You're in and out of that client every single day. So that's why I always like the solutions architect role, because it usually pays more than the sales engineer. It's a little more executive. It gets better visibility in the company. You get promoted a lot faster. But I spent some time as a sales engineer and enjoyed that too, prior to moving into the bigger architect roles, and it was fun. I've also done sales and I like it, but a lot of people that are coming from tech don't want to be sales reps. I don't blame you. That's a harder stress job, but it's still a good high-paying tech job, and it can't be outsourced. Anybody that's coordinating a billion-dollar program being rolled out, again, that can't be there. And senior management definitely can't be getting rid of the top. And the first line managers companies can't get rid of, but those managers in the middle between the top and the bottom, they're usually cut too when times get there. So there's that. So what I could say is increase your leadership skills no matter what you do. Increase your communication skills no matter what you do. Increase your presentation skills no matter what you do. Increase your emotional intelligence no matter what you do, because that will do two things for you. It'll make it much easier for you to get a new job, because that's what hiring managers desire. And they will literally fight over you people that communicate well, that are easy to get along with and still know technology. So that'll be a good skill. Plus, that'll make it easier for you if you want to move into a sales engineer or a solutions architect role, or take the kind of training that we offer and move into a solutions architect role or a cloud architect role, which is available all over the world, but predominantly in the West, or places like Australia, New Zealand. There's plenty of architect jobs there, plenty all over Europe, but yeah, as you would say, mostly West, North America, South America. So yes, I could see where you're coming from. So yeah, that's probably what I would do, is I'd move into an architecture program if it was me, but I love the architecture career. But I've done a lot of careers, whether it's healthcare, which I've been in, whether it's the emergency services, which I've been in, and whether it's related to architecture, which I spent a quarter of a century in, which I love, which is the passion of my life and my career. But the other thing, Apoorva, that I really want you to think about is do what makes you happy. And see, when managers evaluate people, we look at a couple things. One of the things we look at is, can they do the job? But we also look at, can we trust them? Are they energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate about the work? Are they willing to go above and beyond? Are they a good team player? Now, if you think about that, if you love it, so I love networking. See that little CCIE plaque behind me? The hardest certification in the world. Here's how much I love networking. One day I'm working in healthcare, practicing internal medicine, and 9 months later, I'm a CCIE. From the time I decided to say I'm going to start getting certified, I did a CCNA, CCDA, CCNP, CCDP, and a CCIE. Nobody would do that. But why did I do it? Because when I saw networking, I loved it so much that I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning and studied for 3 hours. I studied during work and no one was looking when I got my work done. I studied until 10 o'clock at night, and I studied 16 hours Saturday, Sunday, and I did nothing other than think and study and dream how I could learn networking because I loved it. And then when you find somebody that's got that, when they've got that passion, they will do anything and they'll be great. So, do follow your passion. Do something you love. But if you ask me where the good opportunities are, I told you where the best opportunities are. But I also want you to be happy. Because if you're like me, and I worked as an engineer for a couple months, and it was stressful. People were calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning because they were an outage. They're like, Mike, you're the BGP guy. You go figure it out. And I'm like leaving my house in the middle of the night. I'm driving in the dark, coming into the office at 2 o'clock in the morning to fix stuff. And I was like, okay, this is not fun. So after a couple months of that, I moved into an architect role. And instead of touching the tech and fixing broken stuff, I was taking people to lunch. I was taking them to drinks. I was taking them to dinner. We were having conversations. I was leading a meeting. I was facilitating a meeting. I was writing a document and giving a presentation. And I used to tell my wife, because I used to bring her with me on a lot of these trips, that I can't believe they pay me to work as an architect, but I love it. So I hope that helps, and please feel free to ask more. Future of the cloud job market. Well, it's good, but it's going to be what we've been teaching versus what people thought. So when we started our architecture programs 4 years ago, we taught them as a hybrid we made everybody a hybrid multi-cloud architect. And the first thing we told people is we have to evaluate where the workload should go. FinOps is how you fix the problem after the fact. The way you optimize cost is the proper architecture. And why do I say this? I can give you a server that you can buy from Dell right now for $300,000, and you can plug it in your data center, and it's going to cost you $300,000, maybe a couple $1,000s over the next 3 years in electric. So let's say $305,000. Now that same server in AWS, if we had depending upon the number of virtual machines with 1 terabyte NVMe drives, which we could host on that server, could cost us $6 or $7 million in 3 years on AWS. So $300K in the data center, $6 or $7 million in AWS for that one server. Now, that's a high throughput, high performance workload. That doesn't make any sense to stick it in the cloud. And what happened, Varesh, is all these companies stuck it in the cloud, and we told people ahead of time, they're going to be coming right out of the cloud. It's just a matter of time. So then 2024 became the year of cloud repatriation, which is everybody's took half or a third of the stuff they put in the cloud. And what they pulled back from the cloud is going to be very interesting. What they pulled back from the cloud was the high throughput stuff, the stuff that can cost 10 times more in the cloud. So now we're getting to where it's supposed to be. Initially, you could see companies that were just AWS. We used to look at it and say, huh? You can't do that. What happens when they have an outage, a global outage? And after a couple of outages, all of a sudden, everybody is hybrid multi-cloud. Now, everybody means 98% of enterprises use more than one cloud. So a cloud architect like the kind we teach that knows how to design the data center, knows how to design a private cloud like OpenStack and Nutanix, because cloud computing is not going away, knows how to architect in a Cloudflare versus an Azure versus an AWS versus the Alibaba cloud, the Dell cloud, the HP cloud, or whatever cloud of your choice. That's what the market needs. And that's what we've been teaching. So when I used to say, people are like, should I learn Azure? I'm like, no, learn the cloud. And that really what the translation is, Mike, should I learn how to drive a Mercedes? And I say, should you learn how to drive first thing I'd say is, do you own a Mercedes? And they'd say no. And I'd say, well, why don't you drive a car and then you can still drive a Mercedes and drive whatever car you own. And that's really what we're talking about. So huge need for cloud architects to fix all the mistakes, because right now we cloud architects are doing cloud repatriation projects, but also cloud computing gives us something pretty nice. So Varesh, here's what we get out of cloud computing. I can have a data center or cloud provider, it doesn't matter. Let's have 1,000 servers in my data center. Now with the 1,000 servers I have in my data center, I can add machines, remove machines, add them, remove them. This thing gets busy, pull from the capacity, remove from the capacity. And it's done dynamically, and it's fast, and it's easy, and it's efficient. And I can use infrastructure as code to deploy 1,000 virtual machines in 5 minutes. So we don't need 50 engineers to do it. It can be done in 5 minutes by one script. So that's not going to go away. But guess what? Now I can do that in my data center. I can put an OpenStack cloud and a Nutanix cloud in my data center, and I can get the higher performance, which you get in the data center versus the cloud because of the network performance. I can get higher security, and I can do it all on my own, and I don't have to rent it. But at the same time, what about stuff on demand? What about that capacity on demand? What about that one thing that AWS does better in the world and Google does better in the world? Well, that's where you use the cloud. So there's lots and lots and lots of opportunities in cloud. So here's your skill sets and where they're going to be. It's going to be in cloud architecture. And the reason is we need people that understand the business, that can tie the pieces together. Now, everything, when I use cloud, I'm going to count cloud as a data center. So it's going to be cloud everything. So cloud architecture, which is the generic architect that basically designs the whole thing and gets the specialty architects to come with them. You'll see it in cloud security architecture. Security is huge. And because of this, we need architects to design the security. Cloud security architecture is one of the hottest roles out there. There's millions of open positions in cybersecurity right now. So can't find anybody that understands security. So definitely cloud security architect. Now the cloud AI architect, that's what we're teaching it. And that's why David Linthicum is teaching this program, because I only have 20 years working with AI and he has 35. So he's in a better position to teach this than me. Everything's AI and everything's going to be AI for a little while. Look, I helped design parts of the internet when that was built out and everything was internet and then it wasn't and then it was again. But everything we live our lives now is internet based for the most part, or private internet based, but still all network stuff. So you're definitely going to see the AI, and whether it's generative AI, machine learning, deep learning, AI agents, it's going to be all of it. So, you're definitely going to see there. Now, they're kind of I still say enterprise architects, and here's the reason: 70 to 80% of cloud projects don't work. I mean, the tech works, but they provide no business value, and enterprise architecture is there. So they're my 5 biggest architecture careers. But, what other careers do I still like in tech? I like sales careers, not low-end sales where you're selling a car. High-end, like global account manager, relationship-based roles, they're great. I mean, they're truly great. Big opportunities there. I really do like executive leadership roles, meaning the leader that everybody goes to, the leader that invites, the leader that inspires, the leader that brings a team to do great things. Those still things are there because it's human. But any of the things that can be automated, like software development, that's so easy to automate, and it's sad, but it's true. Now we can take those software developers that may know how to code, we can then teach them how to present, teach them how to lead, teach them how to sell, and teach them about application design, which they probably know how to build versus design, and move them into an application architect role. And because that role involves communicating with people and leading and presenting and facilitating, can't replace them. Now that person, instead of being an architect, could learn to be a cloud architect, enterprise architect, sales rep as well. So those I feel really good about. I also feel fairly good with big program manager roles. The roles where they're managing billion-dollar technology rollouts, because they require a lot of coordination. I have a friend, Jazz, that does that with Cisco, who's unbelievable. Again, those roles I see that are really kind of safe. But anything that requires a lot of person, and the more rare your skills are. So when we talk on architect roles, here's the reason why they're paid so much. And here's the reason why we can't hire them. And here's the reason: if you think in terms of supply and demand curves, which is what we do as economists, and spent too much of my life studying economics, you have to actually look at where the demand is and where the supply is. So when we deal with it, let's say software developer, everybody's been told to code for the last 30 years. And guess what? There's no shortage of software developers, because it doesn't matter if you do your code in California, the Cayman Islands, Cambodia, Cameroon, Cape Town, or any other city begins with a C, like the Cookie Monster would say from Sesame Street. So it just doesn't matter. So think about that. But anything that's human to human, and if you're an architect, for example, you have to present, you have to lead, you've got to manage stakeholders, you have to manage vendors, you have to manage people. You've got to group meetings. You got to lead RFI, RFP, RFQ responses. You have to manage stakeholders, present to stakeholders, do a little bit of schmoozing. You'll be good. So those are the jobs that I'd recommend, and why? Because they cannot be done by AI. And finding someone that understands technology, how systems work, not how to build them, which is also impossible, and combine that with business acumen skills, and you're the perfect edge of that supply and demand curve for a high salary. And that's why the average architect role pays over $200,000 a year, but you'll see many roles, and they're not that hard to get with a few years experience and expertise to pay $500,000 or more as an enterprise architect, cloud architect, etc. Hope that helps. Please, if you've got questions, bring them in. We want to do anything we can to help. CISP. Not sure of a CIMSP, unless you mean CISM. Oh, I know which one you're referring to. So if you look at the CISSP, which is a certification that I do enthusiastically recommend, and I teach the CISSP in every single program we have, because to me, the CISSP is bare minimum security knowledge for a cloud architect or an enterprise architect, and that's why everybody we have gets a CISSP. Now, our security architects in our training get a whole lot more than just the CISP. I'd say about 30, 40, 50 times more than that, but that's why they're architects. But if I look at the CISSP, the reason I like it is got a lot of respect in the industry. Meaning, if you have it on your resume and you have the correct resume, they're more likely to call you in for an interview. I will tell you that the CISSP was my intro to cybersecurity. It was the first security exam I ever passed back in 2003, and I loved it. I learned a lot. The CISSP is basically an architecture exam without the architecture. What I mean by that is they teach you every single component that you could possibly use in a security architecture. So basically they teach you every tool and option, but they don't teach you how to put it together, which I don't know, it's a certification, but it covers everything. So it covers data security, network security, the various kinds of IAM and what you can do with it, different kinds of encryption, risk management practice. I mean, it's a test. So the CISSP is a management executive kind of certification. Now, the Certified Information Security Management Principles is a little different. It's more about managing a security program. It's less about security, more about the business side. I'll tell you, it's not one that I really tend to recommend. I'll tell you that there's 3 security certifications that I use with my clients. And I use the CISSP because this is the big, bad security certification. It's the equivalent of the CCIE in security. It's just a lot easier. But the managers love it. So I use that as my sledgehammer. I do teach the CISM. And the reason I teach the CISM is it teaches you the perspective of the manager. And the ISACCI did a beautiful job with it. So I really like what they did there. And so I like the CISM, and even though it's an incredibly basic exam, I also like the CCSP, the Cloud Certified Security Professional from the ISC Squared. I like those 3 on a resume. I don't typically recommend the rest. As far as when you start getting into these more executive-y certifications, I'd rather see an MBA on a resume, quite frankly. I'd rather see the CISSP when I hire someone to know that they might know what the technology actually is. The CISM, which is more executive things, I prefer to see those. So It's not one that I recommend, but the CISSP is one that I can recommend to everybody. In fact, the other reason I don't recommend it is I had to go look it up. And then I remembered exactly what it was, because sometimes you remember the certification and not the acronym. And when it comes to a certification, here's what you really want. You want someone to look at it and go, ooh, that's cool. And if they don't know what it is, they're not going to get that, ooh, that's cool. That CCA got that, wow, that's cool. The CISSP, okay, I might want to talk to this person. And that you're not going to get that with another certification, so those other ones. So I hope that helps in prioritizing what you're going to do. And the CISSP, when I took mine, there were senior directors in my program from Cisco that were in the program. There were attorneys that were taking the CISSP. There were other executives. There were salespeople taking it. There were engineers taking it. There were architects taking it. And it's just a good overall enhance your general knowledge security certification, the CISSP. Love it. That's what I can tell you. But if you've got a different career goal or something different in mind, I'd like to learn more. That might change it. You're enrolled in our 9-Life program. In order to build a good resume, should I finish the program first and then do the CCNP, ESNARI followed by the CCSP? So, well, John, I need you to finish the program, because if you don't finish the program, you won't have the skills to do anything. I think the certifications that I would do right now, probably given the way the market has changed, which is what we're now working with is the CISSP, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional, or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, which you have access to, and soon Google Professional Cloud Architect you'll have access to. I would do one of them, which is what we're now recommending in the program, one of those three. TOGAF 10, and there is TOGAF training in the program, and the CISSP. I love the CCNP, but it's not getting the mileage that it actually used to in terms of people wanting to look at the resume and say, aha, I got to talk to this person. And that's why we changed it to TOGAF 10 right now, CISSP, and one of the cloud provider certifications. We're getting better responses. We got better responses with these, but what happens, you start looking and talking to managers, you start looking and talking to recruiters, and all of a sudden you see, we're looking for this. So we tune as it is, because, for us, the job is to teach you how to be an architect. That's the real thing. But after that, we want to guide you with the certifications so that people see you and want to talk to you in the first place. That should be all you need. But, and in order to build the good resume, when you follow the program, there will be a good resume template on what to do. We'll talk about things that need to be there, things that don't need to be there. And I hope you're following along that structure when you get there, because it'll talk to you about what needs to be on your resume. And it'll talk about how to translate your old life and whatever that is. Denzel Gardens, most job postings ask for 10 years experience as an architect. Is it possible with project cert skills and trainings to bypass? So Denzel, I've never seen an accurate job description in my entire life. You want to get him a job at McDonald's? They want 10 years experience. You want a French desk job at a hotel? There will be a receptionist. They want 10 years experience. You want a help desk job? They want 10 years experience. You want to be an Uber driver? They want 10 years experience. You don't need 10 years experience. No one cares. And Denzel, here's why all these job descriptions are crazy. And I just made a video I released about it. Chris, provide the link to this. And here's what happens. So let's say I'm working at a big tech company. Now I say I need to hire a cloud architect. And what I do, I pick up my phone and I call HR, or I go to a website, fill out a form. HR then writes a job description for a job that they know nothing about. And then they have a job description that has 15 different people's careers, 10 Olympic gold medals needed, and nobody's going to talk to you, whatever. That's the job description, which is completely meaningless. And then there's the job description that the manager actually has, which is what they're looking for. Everybody in tech got a job, for the most part, that wanted 10 years experience that got there. And there's a million of us out there. We all got our job. First job I wanted 10 years experience. I had none. Now, I will tell you, within a year, I took a job as a senior network engineer on Wall Street, designed the fastest system for the fastest trading system in the world. And I had 1 year experience, but they wanted 15. And a year later, I was a principal architect, and they were looking for, 10 to 20 years experience. And I did have 2. So don't worry about the experience. Here's what the manager cares about. Can you do the job? And I'm going to tell you right now, if I interview 1,000 people, 999 won't be able to do the job. So we put up things like this, like 10 years experience, not because you need 10 years experience, but because we don't want someone that just took an AWS certification exam to call us. Because if they just took an AWS certification exam, they don't even know what they don't know. And I'm not joking. I'm literally not joking. So that's the key, is they need to know that you have it. So it doesn't matter. I gave you a couple of examples that were a little earlier of people that were there. And, Victor was a 24-year-old college student, for example, that was hired. I didn't mention Victor earlier. And Michael, well, he took a little longer. He was a sysadmin, but he still managed to become a security architect as his previous job. But he did have a tech background. But Jermaine is, someone that I really think about. Jermaine was a guy who was selling landscaping gear. Now, Jermaine is smart, but he's working as an enterprise architect now. And I can tell you, Jermaine got offers from some of the best tech and consulting firms in the world after meeting with him. So, that's a perfect example. But I didn't mention Jordan earlier. I mentioned Yvonne, his friend, but Jordan was hired by AWS as a kid. He had no experience. He was like 23, 24, just graduated school. He trained with us, and poof, he's over there. So it really doesn't matter what your background is. Now, the skill competency gets you hired. So if you have the right skills, when you get an interview, you'll be hired, just like I was, and just like so many people are. Now, the next phase is, do you know how to brand yourself? Do you know how to show somebody that you're ready for the job? For example, if someone puts on their LinkedIn profile, design client networks using the AWS well-architected framework, we know they've probably never worked anywhere in their entire life, because they're probably not using the AWS well-architected framework in an environment that's got 30 other vendors. Especially since the AWS well-architected framework makes the same recommendations for every company in the entire world, regardless of the business. So they're probably using a TOGAF framework or a Zachman framework or something like that. So when piecing something like that, it looks like a fake resume. Now, when someone said deployed infrastructure as code script and they're a cloud architect, they're not doing that as a cloud architect. Now, they would be doing that as a cloud engineer or a DevOps engineer, but when it's under the resume as a cloud architect, we know it's a made-up job, because cloud architects don't touch the technology. So if you had a real architect resume and you had things that looked real architect-wide, like designed enterprise-wide systems that provided 99.9% availability, managed key stakeholders across the organization, led the response for RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, managed several proof of concepts, consulted with global retailer and increased their revenue by XYZ% by increasing an AI recommendation system on their new website. Presented to C-suite, to the board. When people see that and you've got the skill, now they're ready to call you. And then to put the icing on the cake, then we put the fancy certifications once you're there. And then you get interviews, and then you get hired. So it takes a big thing. We'll talk, if you come to our webinar tomorrow, on how you create, what you create, and how you get people to come to you. And that's the thing. You should have people coming to you every day throughout your life to hire you. That's why I had to take cloud architect off of my resume and just make it CEO and thought leader. Because even today, someone says, I need an architect with your skill in my DM. But that's the thing, because it's just not easy to find someone that has these skills. So yes, it's possible. It's no problem whatsoever. None. As long as you have the right skills. Nicole was a teacher, for example, working as an architect. Pierre was a sailboat operator. It just doesn't matter. But you have to have the skills, and you have to have the correct skills. It'd be good to go. If you want to know the entire list, join us tomorrow. And I'll give you the entire list that you can join us in the free webinar. And we'll talk to you. And I can also assess you, see where your gaps are, strengths, weaknesses, and build, and tell you what you would need specific to you as well after what I say. Let's bring in the next one. If anybody has questions, just let me know. Bring them in. We want to do what we can to help. He was a functional analyst and recently switched to cloud, urged your AZ900, AZ102 on the way to AZ04 and 305 prep. What do you recommend you must do or build to become an architect fast? By the way, you have 13 years of experience. So right now, you just talked to me about a lot of system administration certifications. So DE, I'm going to ask you real architect things, and then I'm going to tell you why it's not going to be there. So you don't have to answer the question, but I want you to be able to think, could you? Could you talk to me about when I would want to use one of the modern AMD EPYC processors versus one of the RISC-based processors on AWS? Could you tell me the strengths and weaknesses of each compute option, how that would affect my IT operations, how that would affect my software development teams inside of my organization if I chose to use one of those RISC-based processors as opposed to a CISC-based processor like an AMD or Intel? Because you need to know that. And I guarantee it won't be there. So unless it's in your last 13 years experience, you wouldn't know. Could you talk to me about how I can load share across 3 direct connections or Azure Express routes without getting out of order packets? So that's something you might need to know. DE, could you tell me whether I should use a dedicated private line like an Azure Express route versus a SASE wide area network versus a IPsec VPN versus a soft WAN based upon my architectural considerations? Would you know how to architect your demilitarized zone for a mission critical application to be accessed from the web? Would you understand when a CEO says they have a 14% CAGR and they're running on constraints in their systems and they need to be able to accommodate a 14 to an 18% CAGR on their systems? And what that might mean on the infrastructure to scale that and make that happen. So there's a big difference between learning how to pass a certification exam and learning how to be an architect. What you're seeing in these certifications is how do I pass a test? So to be an architect, if you have the knowledge I'm going to talk to that I talk to you, then you're fine. If it's not, you're going to have to learn architecture and be taught architecture by someone. And, you know, I wish they actually had an architecture exam, but here's why it's not possible. And that's not true. There is one architecture exam out there, and Cisco makes it. It's called the Cisco Certified Design Expert. And here's the way Cisco gives you the exam. First, the exam's like $2,000, and 80% of the people are going to fail it or more when they take it. So there's that. So you go to California or whatever the few locations are, and they give you a business case and a challenge. They talk to you about a company that's got a business problem and some technical challenges. They give you a very short period of time to actually create the architecture, design it, and then you have to present it back to a technical professional that can see it from an executive perspective as well at Cisco. You have to present your architecture to them, and they're going to interrogate you on that architecture. And they're going to ask you, what trade-offs did you consider between this option and this option? What made you choose this option versus this option? What were your architectural trade-offs? Where's the weakness in your architecture? Where's the breaking point? What could you... And if you can pass that and defend it, then you pass the exam. Now, because the job of the architect, realistically, DE, is to walk into the client's C-suite and literally ask them, what are your business goals, business pain points, business challenges? So do you have the knowledge to walk in and speak to a multi-billionaire CEO and talk to them about their business and how to tune that business? If not, you're going to need to be training. Now, DE, before we even think about designing a technology solution, we need to know what kind of business problems we have and how the employees actually do their job. Imagine a sales rep that needs to do things in a certain way to sell, and all of a sudden someone from engineering designs a new application that makes it impossible for that sales rep to sell. You just broke the business. And this happens all the time. So the next thing you need to do is be able to understand how to meet with the client's executives, ask who the key stakeholders are, map out that business architecture, and work with the executives of that organization to tune any things business-wide, like how they might do things, a process, for example. Now, at this point, you've got to create an architecture team, and it's going to take 15 to 50 people. So you're going to have to build that team and lead that team. And they're going to evaluate the current client's technology platforms, document its strengths and weaknesses for you. You're going to present that back to the client, and then you're going to basically create a new strategy, a new architectural blueprint, present it back to them, document it up, get the stakeholders' feedback and impact, contact the vendors that are going to be part of your architecture, potentially lead a proof of concept exam, where you lead a team of people building a proof of concept, and you have to convince the customer it's meeting their expectations. Then you create a governance structure, and then basically you create the statement of work and you go into a new client. So none of that is going to be in there because that's what we do as architects. And that's why I wish I didn't have to do it, but that's why I created our Cloud Architect Career Development Program. Because people will get 10 and 15 and 20 certifications, and the certifications in the name or something, and how to configure it, but you won't do any of that in the job. So there's nothing you must build, but you do need to know how to design an architecture, because every question I just asked you is fair game on an interview, and that's the kind of things that are necessary. So the answer is you can do it, but you're going to need training. But you may actually know some of this because you've been involved. You said 13 years, and you may have learned it, and you may not have, but that's why I wanted to assess you. So if you want to come to the webinar tomorrow, the How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar, I'll give you the full skill list and exactly everything you need to learn. And you can see if you can learn it with us, learn it by going, say, to an MBA program for some things, to an executive coach for others, and various technical academies for other things. You can learn it with us. I don't really care. I mean, I'd love to train you, but whatever you do, I just care that you get hired. I care that you get this job because it's the greatest thing in the world, and that's all I want. I loved my architecture career. Hope that helps. Do I provide one-to-one mentoring? So, Alex, yes, we do have one-to-one mentoring that is purchasable on our website. Having said that, and I am happy to do it, there's a huge opportunity cost to my time because I'm very busy, so it's fairly expensive. So if it's an easy question, on any of the webinars that I run on Thursdays, I'm really happy to answer them because it's free. But yes, we do them. Chris from my team can drop a link on how to do it. And yes, you can use one of our 50% off Memorial Day coupons on that. But yes, we do them. But if it's possible that I can answer any questions in like a how to get your first cloud job webinar, and we can have a face-to-face conversation there, if it's the kind of thing we can talk about and I can do it for free, I'd love to do that. So, but yes, I do them, and I'm happy to do them. I love doing them, actually. But we do have a global program that has been pretty incredibly effective at getting people hired in North America, South America, England, Europe. Yes, I separated England and Europe. South Africa. I'm sorry, all of Africa, actually, but especially South Africa. Plenty of people, Australia, New Zealand hired, and even some in the rest of the East, but predominantly those areas. Pretty much all parts of the world, we have students and gotten people hired except for Antarctica. Company you work for is hiring offshore resources. Absolutely. Obviously, they're PhD Java developers. You would expect that. You feel that tech work in the West is slowing down. Thoughts on this? So, Rizakhan, tech work in the West is not slowing down. It's actually accelerating. But if you look at the articles we put out 2 years ago, we said get out of engineering. We said get out of anything that's not customer facing. And Chris may have a link to that, may not. You can also see some articles on our website. I think it was Forbes magazine and CIO magazine I talked about this with. But because I've been in a lot of these tech publications, and in that I talked about why you need to get out of engineering jobs. So here's what's going on. Google's writing 25% of their code with AI. Microsoft's writing about 30% of their code with AI. Facebook is in that 30% range. And I believe Google when they say, look, by this time next year, 70% of our code will be done without developers because AI writes better code. Now, the reason we wrote this 2 years ago was, I've worked with AI for decades, but now generative AI is so good. You look at Claude's most recent model or OpenAI's most recent model, and this code's better than 30% of the programmers that are out there already. So what's happening is companies are saying, you have to be better than AI. You have to write a justification. So you're going to see, I think, a lot of engineers being offshored or replaced by AI. Now, it's not all engineers. It's going to be, network engineers, very few people understand networking. So as a rule, if they're solid network engineers, where CCI is entry level, yeah, they're good. And anything less than a CCI, I would worry about. So security engineers, they're safe. And the reason strong security engineers are safe is basically nobody knows security. So security engineers have probably 5 to 10 years. Security architects are always probably going to be safe because, again, the side of it. So it's not that the work is slowing down. They're calling us architects in for bigger and bigger projects. Data center spending is going up. Cloud spending is going up. AI spending is going up in the West. So there's a lot more of it. But the jobs that we don't need people to really do, we use AI for. And the jobs that can be outsourced. they're gonna outsource them in many cases. So that's why you'll see these software development jobs and a lot of these types of tech support jobs outsourced, because $100,000 in the U.S. is worth approximately $37,000, $38,000 in India, Pakistan, that kind of part of the world. So, it's a big difference, and that's why organizations are doing it. So, yeah, I would expect you to see a lot more offshoring of resources in software development. I hate it, but it's true. A lot more in tech support, and a lot more in these basic engineering roles. And that's why we've been recommending for a couple of years, move into architecture, cloud architecture, solutions architecture, because the sales roles, enterprise architecture, security architecture, AI architecture. And here's why. Every time there's a new technology, it's an opportunity for businesses to make money on it. And the people that design that strategy are architects. But the engineering, if it's software development, could it be done by somewhere else? And can they use AI to generate it quicker? So that's where you're going that. So it's selective in what you're seeing. If you live in a world with a lot of devs, you're going to be seeing a lot of things and hearing a lot of sad things. If everybody you know is an architect and you're hearing all of those great things, it's going to sound good to you. So yes, it's not slowing down, but certain fields are kind of getting damaged, and I wish it wasn't the case, and it's sad. So I recommend getting out of certain fields for those reasons, just as I've been published in magazines. And you can see a lot of those articles on our website. Sounds good. If you have some questions for me, let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep going to them. Luke, hi from England. Just wanted to say, for the past 3 months in your spare time, you've been watching my guide, what to pass the Solutions Architect Associate. I am so happy. You just passed your exam yesterday. Keep at it. I think I got to see your message last night, and I was so happy to receive your message. So thank you, and that's absolutely wonderful. I'm thrilled and happy to see that. And that's why we do these. I love doing these free webinars or these free boot camps, and I love when people tell me they finished them. I really do love that. Hi, Mike. If you want to practice daily to become an architect, how to plan, give us a roadmap. I have a roadmap, Varesh. Join me tomorrow on the How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar, and I will give you everything that you need to learn. I'll tell you how you learn it with us, but I'll also tell you every skill that you would need to learn in case you wanted to go to business school, for example, to learn certain set of skills. Like I did. I didn't have a course like mine, so I did an MBA. I hired an executive coach. I hired executive leadership things. I did whatever it took. And I'm happy to tell you the list and where you want to get that training. That's up to you, but I want you to be informed, educated, and prepared so you can win. You know what? Let me see if I can kind of think about how I can make it a little easier today, but I still want you to come to that webinar. So if you really think of what you need to learn and what it comes to be an architect, it's going to be the two sets of skills. Now, obviously, you need to be able to communicate with the C-suite, which is called CXO relevancy. You need to be able to sell because you have to sell the architecture to the executives. You need to be able to lead an architecture team. The last part of the interview that you're going to be on is the presentation in front of a panel, and you'll give presentations every day. You're going to really have to understand what it takes to lead meetings, facilitate meetings, get stuff done in a large and corporate environment. You'll have to learn how to drive RFI responses, RFP responses. You'll have to understand some degree of business process reengineering or how to optimize processes. And you're really going to have to understand business. Now, you don't need an MBA, but you do need MBA level knowledge. Now, we teach that MBA level knowledge in our program, but you do need MBA level knowledge. Now, when it comes to the technology working with, you really have to understand the underlying components. Now, it's not the names of the stuff, it's not how to configure it, but it's the underlying components, and it's how the technology works. For example, it's not enough to know what block storage is, object storage is, and file storage is. That's our architecture. So you need to understand how the storage is, how the storage works, where the storage is used, what storage does one thing better than the other. So when would you tune it? What would you need? How would you work around the storage performance thing? So it's a different kind of knowledge, but you'd need to know networking. And where in the areas of networking, for example, it's things like BGP, wide area network technology selection, things like things like switching, for example, and VLANs and tagging and trunking and those kinds of things, network encryption, network QoS, network security, just basic networking things, IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting, route planning, route aggregation, how the routing would be. But of course, then you would need to understand compute. You only have 4 options for compute in the cloud. It's either a virtual machine, a container, basically application virtualization and function as a service. Then you need to know storage, like I described to you, but you also need to know how to work around storage. When do you need to use RAID? When do you use various types of technologies to higher performance file systems like a Lustre? When do you need to work with, say, maybe NetApp to integrate into Lustre to actually get something that looks like fast block storage, because block storage is slowed in the cloud? Then it's typically after you think about databases, the types of databases, when you would use them, how you would scale them, how you would tune them, how you would protect them. A little bit of big data, things like data lakes and mapping and reduction type functionality, and data warehouses and data mining, and a little bit about AI, those types of things inside of your data environment. Some security, from things like IAM to your network security, things like firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, loss prevention strategies, for example, risk mitigation, business continuity, disaster recovery planning. So you can see it's a fairly holistic scope. But I'll go over the whole list tomorrow and really tie it together. So I hope you can join me there. Next one will be our last question. Chris, bring in the next question. Rohit, you have 10 years experience in backend and Java developer. Can you get a job as a solutions architect? And do we help with job placement? Rohit, as long as you receive the training to become a solutions architect from being a developer, yes, you could be a great solutions architect. Why not? Anybody can. It's not your background. It's your training, your development, your skills. Now, there is a big difference between what you're doing now versus what it will be, but you can do it and you will be fine. So I think typically what we have to do is we have to change the way you think, because engineering requires a very focused thinking. Pritipal, I'm pretty sure Pritipal was a software developer, and we moved him into an enterprise architect role. Lohit recently was a student of ours, and now he's working at AWS as a cloud architect, solutions architect. I can't remember which one he's doing over there, application architect, something like that. So, these are, of course you can get a job as an architect, but you're going to have to be trained. Same thing, Praveen. He'd been working close to the technology his entire life. We trained him in his moving an architect. Because engineering and architecture, they're just very different. The good news from your time in as a backend developer, hopefully you learned about application architecture, and hopefully you know something about which APIs to use and the strengths and weaknesses between various APIs, and how to scale APIs, protect APIs, those kind of things, and some integration side. You may or may not have from your time, but let's just hope you did, because that could be there. You might also know something about software development release cycles. Maybe you know some knowledge about secure coding practices, things like input validation, sanitation, that kind of thing. And you can potentially take that with you and that knowledge with you in your architect role. And that's going to be great, all that knowledge we can pull. Now, the reality is 90% of the things that you need to learn are going to be new. And so what? You're already 10% there. You're only 90%. And you eat an apple one bite at a time. You'll get there. You'll be fine. So, yeah, of course you can be Rohit. Your background does not define your future. What you choose to do defines your future. Now, Grandview, you could have been a nurse like Camille, and I've also gotten her hired as a cloud architect, or a solutions architect as well, because it really doesn't matter where your background is. It just doesn't matter. You could have been a project manager, and of course, you could be trained. And I can think of many. We even had. Can't think of Gladys, for example, again, a student that we had that came in that was a project manager, worked in. You can see her on YouTube. So it happens all the time. You definitely can get any job you want as a solutions architect, as a cloud architect, or an enterprise architect, but you have to have the skills. If you walked into my office right now, here's what I do in an interview, and I can tell you, Rohit, and I've done about 6,000 interviews. When someone walks in my room, and I'm the hiring manager, because I've hired a lot of architects, I still do. And I look at the person and they walk in. Here's the first thing that I think of. Can I put them in front of the company's executives and key stakeholders? Because if I can't, If I have this person and I can't put them in front of my client's CEO, then they can't sell the solution to the client and my company is going to go bankrupt. And if you work at a cloud provider, they're trying to sell stuff. If the solutions architects can't sell or be put in front of the C-suite, they're not getting hired. So that's the first thing. Now, the next thing I think about is, will this person fit into my team? Are they going to enhance the culture? Are they going to cause conflict with others? Are they going to add? So that's the next question I ask myself. Now, the next question I ask myself relevant for a solutions architect is, how clear do they communicate? Long before I even get to the tech, and here's the reason why. Nobody hands an architect a piece of paper that says build this, because we don't touch the technology in the first place. Now, we do have to communicate to 50 different stakeholders, tech leaders, engineers, architects, managers, and a whole bunch of other people, and collect a whole lot of information to even know where to begin. So I'm going to ask, can I put the person in front of an executive? Do they communicate well? Can they get the information? And they're the three first things that I even think about. I then think, do they have a positive attitude, good, strong energy, enthusiasm, and passion? Will my clients take this person seriously? Which means if the person doesn't come in with the gravitas or the executive presence, I can't put them in front of my client. So I start asking all of these questions before I even get to the fact, does the person have the technical competency? And you'll see that with any of these roles that are executive roles. They all require a degree, that level of, can I put you in front of the customer? Can you lead a team? Can you communicate well, before they even think about your tech? And that's why you may be surprised. One of my friends, a VP of NVIDIA, came on one day on this YouTube channel, and he talked about how in many cases, when it comes to these bigger positions, he hires people with better soft skills over better tech people, and he's had to choose. When he has to choose, he'll always choose the person. They'll typically choose the person that gets along better with others, that's the better leader, that brings out the best in others. And we all do as leaders. I had the CEO of, you can see, a recruiting firm. There's lots of videos on this YouTube channel between me and Christina Marino. She's the CEO of IT Excel, a national recruiting firm in New York City. She's terrific as a recruiter. But when we start looking at these kinds of environments, she'll tell you that lots of times people take the person with the better soft skills. So you need it all. But that's where we typically talk about. Now, training you and getting you hired as a solutions architect, we're going to teach you how to get the world to come to you. We're going to teach you what your resume needs to be like. We're going to teach you how to go build the brand. The world should be coming to you. Robert, for example, was a student of mine. He was 61 when we got him his first cloud security architect job. And he would tell me every day, Mike, we're following your messaging, and people came to me. So that's not the hard part, is getting people to know that you exist. I've got someone we have a marketing executive on our team who's got an MBA in marketing and 30 years marketing experience. He kind of helps run the branding strategy for our students and how they would use it. But it's not hard teaching you how to find the right recruiters, get recruiters coming to you, get employers to know who you are, create the things and get it. So getting hired when you know what to do, when you have the right skills, is not that challenging. It's incredibly challenging when you don't have the right set of skills. So we would make it that you would have the right set of skills. So you'd have no problem, or should have no problem, especially if you listen to what we tell you. Good question there. Good question there. You know what? Looks like there's two questions that just popped in. So let's take them. Some tips for the Google Professional Cloud Architect certification. Now that's a real good one. So I will tell you, of all the certifications out there by cloud providers, the Google Professional Cloud Architect is probably the most straightforward. When you take an AWS exam, the challenge in the exam is a whole bunch of words and sentences that are like 40 words long, and trying to even figure out what they're asking. When you deal with a Google Professional Cloud Architect exam, it's pretty straightforward. They actually ask you a tech question. 99% of the time, it's in simple, plain language, and you either know how to answer it or you don't. And in many of these questions, it's based upon a case study that they give you, an architectural case study. So it's the only one that I would call an architecture light exam, because it actually has a little bit of architecture on it. Not a lot, but a little bit. Where the AWS Solutions Architect Professional is a systems administration exam and has nothing to do with architecture. So when you were there, I would say take it straightforward. So this is more about knowing the underlying technology. And if you understand the underlying technologies, it becomes fairly straightforward with Google. So if you understand where to use the virtual machines, where the containers, understand application virtualization, infrastructure as code, understand basic networking, oh, okay, this is what they call these things. It's a pretty straightforward exam. I will tell you, I didn't see any trick questions in that exam when I took it. And to me, it was a fairly simple one. I will tell you that the Cybex book, the Cybex Google Professional Cloud Architect book, was very helpful to me in taking the exam. In fact, the book was so good that, I knew clouds. I knew data centers. Admittedly, I was designing clouds for cloud providers for decades. So nothing new for a cloud about me. The first cloud I worked on was the ISDN cloud in 1993, the Frame Relay cloud in 1999, the ATM cloud I worked on in 2000, the BGP cloud, the first RFC 2547 in 2000. In 2001, 2002 was the VPLS cloud. So I've been involved in clouds before these data center clouds. So I've been involved in them forever. But that book, that Cybex book, was so good that I knew what the cloud was, read the book, and 2 days later passed the Google Professional Cloud Architect exam. So I'll tell you, I really liked that Cybex book. I thought it was good. I thought it was well written. I thought it was a little basic, but it was very well written. Is it worth getting a practice test on these things? Probably, if you're not used to taking a whole lot of tests, and I can help you. But what I can tell you is I'm going to do a completely free Google Professional Cloud Architect Bootcamp, and it's coming up real soon, and it's going to be live on this channel. And when we go through it, we're going to demystify the Google Cloud. We're going to take the concepts and teach you what they are in data center land and data center language, so you'll know what they are. And with that, you'll be much better prepared for the certification. So, we're going to do that with you, and I'm pretty sure that it'll help, especially it's free anyway. So register. My team has dropped the link in the chat box, and we'll help you get through it. But it's a very straightforward exam. Because if you know what a virtual machine is, and somewhere in the knowledge of learning what a compute engine instance is, it's the same thing. And then if you understand, virtual machines and the way ephemeral storage works on all clouds, then you understand, why you need to use block storage to persist data in your on one of your machines, and that's why they might call it a persistent disk, so to speak. So it's going to be very, very straightforward. But I think if you come to the free way that we do it, the way we're going to describe it, we're going to demystify it, we're going to get rid of all the jargon, we're going to get rid of all the fluff. And as architects, we don't touch the technology, so I've never been big on labs, because it doesn't help teach you how to design, but it does teach you how to build, which is a completely different skill. But I had Leo from my team work very diligently to create a lot of labs that will help simplify some of the concepts on the exam for people that want to get hands-on. And Leo's been working on it, and Leo's really great. So we'll have a lot of labs planned for this one as well. So let's have some fun. Register for it. It's going to be free anyway. Do I recommend any good architect books? Yeah. Well, which books? Business books, textbooks? Because there's a whole lot of good ones. So, I'll give you a couple of books that I would like, that I think are pretty good. And I recently released a YouTube video for that. So, Chris, if you want to drop a link to that YouTube video. And what I'll tell you is some books that are out there that I really like. Truthfully, I really like David Lithicum's The Introducer's Guide to Cloud Computing. David is a friend of mine, to be fair. David is also our chief AI instructor, but he's been in this world as long as me, even a couple years longer. He's been an architect now for about 35 years, and he really gets down into it. That's pretty good. I will also tell you that there is a CCIE book. A CCDE book that is very good. It's the Cisco Certified Design Expert. It talks about some architectural frameworks in there that I think you could really be able to appreciate. It also talks about understanding the architecture, scoping the business, and what goes into design. And it's for the Cisco Certified Design Expert, so that's pretty good. I will tell you the Bassam Halabi book, Internet Routing Architectures, really helped me a lot. And I really like that Internet Routing Architectures book because it really explains BGP, where it's used, how it's used. And since you're going to be using BGP to connect to everything, I tend to like that. I will tell you the Stevens TCP IP book. Oh, this book is just great. There's a couple of them. Oh, I might even I have one over here. You can see it's TCP illustrated on right on the opposite side of the what do you call it, of the lion over there. And that is a phenomenal book. There's actually 3 versions of this. And if you were a CCI, you'd say read all 3. But the first one for you is going to be really, really good. I will tell you that Mike Chappelle wrote a book for the CISSP exam. And that's kind of some beautiful intro level cybersecurity fundamentals. I like it. At the same time, Mike Chappelle also wrote a book for the CISM. Wow, that's good because it's going to show you some of what the hiring manager is thinking, and I tend to really like that. So they're probably the main books. Now, if you have any knowledge, any desire to get involved a little deeper with cloud networking, we get into Jeff Doyle's Jeff Doyle's Routing TCP/IP Volumes 1. Typically, really beautiful book there. So there's not a lot, but if you start getting into some of these networking and data center type things, you typically can find some pretty good information. I gave you a couple others inside of that, what do you call it, inside of the video that I just made. And Chris dropped a link to my top 10 books for cloud architects. Chris, you could bring in the next one. Should you work first on the AWS, SAA, or CCSP? So it all depends on your job goals. So CCSP is a security certification. AWS, SAA is a systems administration certification. How do I click boxes on certain things? What's your goal? And that's really the thing. I'll actually tell you, you'll learn more about cloud computing in the CCSP than you will in the AWS Solutions Architect Associate and Professional. I'm also going to tell you it's not going to be enough cloud computing knowledge coming out of that to be enough, but it will be more than you would get out of the AWS exam. But realistically speaking, we have to separate for you, Denzel, the skills versus the certifications that you need. You're going to need to do both. So the first thing that I would do is get the skills. That's going to be the biggest, most critical things. Then after that, I would figure out what career you want after you have the skills. Because Robert Welch was hired when he had no certifications. Delray Batt was hired with 0 security certifications, but he was hired as a security architect because he could do the job. But we couldn't hire him no matter how many certifications he had. We didn't hire him, but CDW hired him. But they couldn't have hired him no matter how many certifications he had if he couldn't do the job. First, do the job. Then, if it depends what it is, then get the certifications to get the interviews. Because knowing how to do the job doesn't mean anybody's going to know how to do the job. I'm going to tell you, Danzel, it'll take you about 10 months to learn how to do the job. And when you're done that, a month or 2 to actually do the certifications. It's exactly going to be the exact opposite way you would think of it because these certifications are admin. So it depends. If I wanted to be a solutions architect or a cloud architect, I personally recommend the one cloud provider's professional, like an AWS SAP or an Azure Solutions Architect Expert or a Google Professional Cloud Architect, just one of them. Then I would do the TOGAF 10. It's an architectural framework to teach you, the steps involved of an architecture, or one way of its approach to frame it. They don't teach you how to be an architect, but steps like start with the business, then do this, etc. And then I would do the CISSP. I wouldn't do the CCSP. I would do the CCSP as a secondary certification for a security architect, but it's not by itself. It's too basic to be enough. Now, if you've got the CISSP, which is your security fundamentals, and then the CISSP is your cloud stuff extra, and then you bolt on the CISM, then you're building something. But the CCSP lacks context, and it's a little too weak on its own without something else. So I would do the CISSP first if it was security that I wanted. Or if you're starting down the solutions architect path, you could do the associate like you have here, and then the professional, but learn how to be an architect first. That's going to be the biggest change. Okay. Dingleman, it's always good to see you. If I had one offer on the table, how would I handle that? So, you brought in a good juicy question there, Dingleman. I know you and you're very smart. So I think that I think we can talk about this. So in a little bit of depth. So let's say you have 2 offers, and I've been in this position. You have to ask yourself a couple of questions before you think about it. One is there one offer that I want that's so bad it's going to change my life? Now, if that's the case, take it. And I can tell you, I've been through that where I had one opportunity, another opportunity, but I wanted one so bad, I just didn't even care, and I took it. Now, let's say that you don't care which one of these you take. Now we start thinking. So if you don't care which one of these can take, and Dingleman, let's say you're in a really good job. If you work where I think you are, you're in a good job, which means you're in a place that's a quality place. They treat you well. You're not in a rush to go there. You're very stable, especially where you're at in cybersecurity. I'd start looking at these options and say, oh, now I'm in a very good position. Now I can negotiate these, because you're negotiating from a position of strength. So then, Dingleman, what I'd probably do is I'd start looking at me. So you know the way the world says, don't compare yourself to others? Compare yourself to others. And here's the way I'm going to teach you how to do this. I want you to look at you, and I want you to say, what do I do well better than others? Now, Dingleman, one is I tell you, I know you're pretty smart and you're pretty fungible. I've seen you. I've known you've changed direction. That could be something. Two is you're incredibly likable. People like being around you. And three, you just adapt and learn very quick. I've had a chance to work with you to get you your first cybersecurity job. Well, I think it's your first, and now, or maybe it wasn't your first, but this last one you got at a big company, and now this, so there's that. So now you can say, okay, this is me. I've compared myself to others. I am better than the competition for X, Y, Z reasons. Then what I want you to do is, Dingleman, think about what those X, Y, Z reasons could be worth to the client. What can you do better than somebody else? Those little things that I asked you to look for, and what can that do? For example, I spent a lot of years learning how to sell. That could be yours. I don't know. But because I learned how to sell, I was able to tell my managers I'm worth more because I've dedicated the last number of years to sell. In addition to this MBA, I've had this, this, and this, which means that my last role, I brought in $1 billion architecture. Imagine what I could do for you. Now, somebody that can bring in $1 billion architecture versus somebody that can bring in a $3 million architecture is worth a whole lot more. So I used my sales to negotiate with them, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. So figure out where you stand, but compare yourself. Are you really worth what the average person is? Are you worth more, or are you worth less? But based that upon your knowledge, your area of actual expertise versus what the level of expertise of the peer is, what you've done versus your peers. So now you know what you can kind of make what's called a swag, a scientific wild something guess. And now you can say, I think I'm worth this. And I've done this because the average is this, but I'm above average here, or I'm below average, and I've adjusted either way. And you do need to do that. And then from there, what you typically need to do is determine what's your best alternative to a negotiated position. And also assuming, because you don't want to take something less than what you want. Now, if you have two jobs and you need one of those two jobs and you have no choice, maybe you don't negotiate it. Because once you negotiate, you potentially risk losing it. But if you have two jobs and you've got a safe place, woohoo, you're in another thing. So now you can take both offers. And you can tell one, thank you, it's a really good offer. I wasn't expecting this to come in. I've got another offer from another company. It's 20,000 more, 30,000 more, 40,000 more, 50,000 more, whatever it is. But I like this company more. Could you meet me somewhere close to it? And do the same thing with the others, assuming it's true or whatever. But you can use that to negotiate back and forth. You can tell them, for example, if you get two offers that you don't like, you can say, oh, that was less than I was really looking for. I've been interviewing expecting this. I have other offers that are here. Is there something you can do? So you can do that potentially. Or you could choose not to, but you need to know what you're willing to accept before you accept it. You know, what you may find with some of these companies is they can't give you a directly higher salary, but they can do something else. For example, in one company, I negotiated an additional 50,000 shares. They could not, or options. They couldn't give me more money, but they gave me a boatload of options. Didn't work out, but it was still worth something that had value. In another company, I negotiated work from home in like 2003. I'm like, I'll do anything, but I'm working from home and I'm not taking red-eye flights unless it's flying to Europe. So, there was a lot of that. So kind of keep that off the table. But that's kind of what I would do. As I would evaluate it, I would look at it, I would think about which options, but I would also evaluate which one's taking you to your goals. Is one getting you closer to your goals, or is one getting you further away from your goals? And I would probably try to, unless it doesn't make sense, I would probably try to align the next job that I took in a role. For example, if your goal is to be a CISO, and right now you're what do you call it? You're a security engineer, and you've got one job as a security architect, and you've got another job as a senior security engineer. Take the architect role. Now, maybe they offer you what do you call it? A director level role too. Now, you might train to be an architect, as I know you have, but might have enough soft skills, business acumen, leadership to get a director level role. And if you do that, that could even pay more. So, which is going to get you closer to your end goal? And Dingham, we can bring that one up in class if you want, because I'd really happily give you any kind of guidance I would on that one. But that's what I would do. I would look at my goals. I would look where I would be. I would look what I'm really worth. I mean, really worth. And you should be good to go. That's what I would do. Do I provide training, placement assistant along with the training? We teach you how to build your resume. We teach you how to reach out to recruiters. We teach you how to interact with recruiters. We teach you how to create your LinkedIn profile, how to market it, and how to get people to come to you. And we've got lots and lots of people hired in every continent you could possibly imagine of. You have the AWS Solutions Architect certification. Honestly, we're going to have to start you from scratch. Even the people that come to us with an AWS Solutions Architect professional, we have to start from scratch. Because if I asked you, could you tell me when you should use a software-defined WAN versus a SASE WAN versus an IPsec tunnel versus a direct connection or a private line? What are the strengths and weaknesses of each approach? What are the challenges of each approach? What are the keys to select them, the design considerations? You're not going to learn that in the AWS Advanced Networking, but you will need to know it to do the job. So it's fine that you have the certification. Good news, you won't have to take it again. But we're going to actually have to teach you to be an architect. And it's just not covered in those certifications. But helping you find a job and getting you trained and giving you all the skills and giving you the right brands that the world wants to hire, that's not a big deal. It's not a hard thing. The hard thing is finding somebody that actually has the skills. I just looked at Renato the other day, who got his first solutions architect job in Canada. And, it's constant. There's constantly people that are getting these good roles. So you just have to have the skill. But if you come to the webinar, I can even assess your skill. Because, I could tell you right now, I've interviewed 1,000 AWS certified people, and 950 didn't know what cloud computing was. And I'm not joking, because they knew the names of a service, how to configure them, did a lot of cloud labs. But when I finally said to them, could you really tell me how to scale a relational database? I went, huh? And when I really talked to them, I said, okay, could you compare and contrast when you use a reverse proxy versus a forward proxy versus a network load balancer versus an application load balancer versus a DNS load balancer? They get lost. So that's the kind of thing that you need to know, is how to use it, when to use it, and why to use it. Hi, Mike, you're trying to get into the cloud architect role. The market in the USA offers more possibilities and roles than Canada. Does our team help Canadians secure a position in the USA? So you got two issues. One is it's not hard to get a job in Canada. Whether it was Arun, who was working at Home Depot, who we got hired as a solutions architect as his first tech job, or it was Pierre, or it was Renato, we get people hired in Canada all the time. Not a hard problem at all. But getting you hired in the USA, that's a legal thing. That takes immigration attorneys and visas, and I am not an attorney. Now, I've had plenty of people that were brought from Canada to the US. I've had people that were brought from Nigeria to Canada while we're in our program and are now working in Canada. But getting you a job across the country, that's going to have to be done by the actual employer, because they're going to have to employ an attorney to do that. There's visas, there's visa applications. And that would cost about 10 times more than our tuition is. But a big company will happily pay for it if you're good and have the skills, and we'll make sure that you're great so you won't have a problem. But getting hired in Canada is not a position. It's not a problem with the right skills. Getting hired without the right skills, that's a challenge. But you shouldn't have any problem. Hopefully you can join us on the webinar tomorrow. But we can definitely, we'll do everything but do the job search for you, because we're going to have to teach you how to do this. Because what's going to happen when you want your next job? When you want an enterprise architect job or a VP job or a CIO job, we're going to prepare you for everything and even teach you how to negotiate a higher salary. All of it. And that's what we do. Okay, I want to remind everybody of a couple of free things we have going on for you. Tomorrow, we have a How to Become a Cloud Architect webinar. And if you want to discuss any other roles, AI architect, security architect, enterprise architect, whatever, we could talk about all the architecture roles. I've done pretty much all of them in the last 25 years. I also wanted to let you know that next week, we're going to do, was it next week or the week after that? Chris will drop the link in it. He just tells me where I need to be because it's hard to remember with all my things. We're going to be doing a completely free Google Professional Cloud Architect Certification Bootcamp. It'll go on for about 2 weeks. It's free. You can sign up. My team just dropped the link. And we currently have, for a short period of time for Memorial Day, a 50% off sale on everything we have. Chris, if you want to drop a link to our website or something like that in the chat box, that would be great. So maybe give it a like if you learned something, had a good time today. Maybe subscribe to our channel, hit the bell to be notified of new videos to help you in your tech career. And I'll see you soon.